Hi everybody, Tim Hughes here. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite. With me today I've got Sara Carty, and we're going to be talking about cyber diplomacy, not something that we've talked about before. Sarah, tell us, where can people find you?
So they can find me on LinkedIn for the most part. That's where I spend a big chunk of my time. Otherwise, they can check out my website, unboring.digital. But mostly, you'll find me on LinkedIn if you want to find me quickly.
So before we actually dive into the cyber diplomacy area, why don't you just sort of like give your background in terms of why you are an expert in that area?
Well, expert's a big word. I can definitely share some experts later on. I would say I'm more of a researcher because I'm still in the research process. But I think, do you want me to just go into a little bit of my sort of background in
Yeah,
general? And
yeah.
yeah, okay. So I have spent the last 15 years working in tech companies across a number of different types of tech companies. So everything from fintech to HR tech to logistics tech, all the techs, right? And eventually made my way into cybersecurity. I worked with a wonderful cybersecurity startup for a number of years, and then just kind of fell in love with the industry, if I'm honest. I like the fact that you can actually see that you're making an impact. You know, you are sort of one of the protectors, as they call it, and that drew me in quite a bit. The other thing that drew me in quite a bit was the storytelling involved. You know, when you hear about a breach or you hear about an insider threat or anything like that, you know, there's always a really interesting and exciting story behind it. So that kind of drew me in even more. Decided to then, I guess, similar timing, launch Unboring, which is my marketing agency that focuses on cybersecurity, and also go into further education as a researcher at the University of East London in the cyber diplomacy department, which is very new. We are the first cohort for cyber diplomacy specifically. Typically, it was just infosec in the organization. Then they've expanded.
So how does cyber diplomacy basically what's the difference between that and traditional diplomacy?
Well, I think it's more so using those diplomatic tools and international cooperation to manage the issues related to cyberspace and to cybersecurity, and digital technology in general, I should say. It's kind of like, I always describe it as like if foreign policy and cybersecurity had a baby.
Yes.
And that's what you would get from cyber diplomacy. And it's a lot of discussion around, conflict in cyberspace, and establishing rules of engagement and responsibility, looking at different state behavior, um, and then also just promoting digital trust, and ensuring that people have the right insight, have the right education, and that, to be fair, that government is taking it quite seriously because everybody lives in online now. So it's no longer a nice to have.
So in a world of constant cyber threats, how do nations and organizations build and maintain trust online?
I think through through transparency first and foremost. So ensuring that they're transparent about what's happening. Developing shared norms is another one, and consistent behavior, as well as ensuring that people understand the narrative. I mean, just in your question there, trust is both built and broken in cyberspace, right? So I think that it can be broken, if we think about the way a corporate company operates, trust can be broken by a single breach, right? It can be a leak or a disinformation campaign. And if you think about it in the way that we think about how we trust brands, it can take years to build trust in a brand, right? You can build it up we've seen that with massive consumer products and consumer brands, and it can literally take a second to break it.
Yeah.
So there have to be some safeguards in place, and the more transparent you can be, the more you can get ahead of it, and the more you can start to learn from that behavior as well, is it's going to be a better outcome for all, I think.
And why do states and non-state actors engage in cyber espionage, and what do they see at the political gain from that?
I mean, and again, like, I will share some incredibly well-versed people in this space, because I'm an early researcher. So that's something that I'll share at the end. But it's because it's cheaper and less risky. I mean, think about the a state line, or everything is being done online. There's less risk than traditional
There's no
espionage.
body bags turning up in
Exactly that. I mean, yes, you might get uncovered. Yes, a country might uncover another country doing something nefarious, but at the end of the day, you don't have someone sitting in that country and then being held. It's essentially, the barriers to the country have now been removed to a degree. So it gives countries access to secrets, to new technology, influence without actually crossing a border. So you can launch influence campaigns as well, and influence things like politics, which we've seen a number of times. And it's about gaining insights in the same way that put my marketing hat on, would love to get insights into competitors of my clients. You get insights into what's going on in the country next to you, or the country that you might need to get a little bit more information about, or whatever it might be. So there's a massive advantage.
Yeah, I've written before about how uh, people have influenced campaigns through social media purely by using
Yeah.
psychology
Oh
more
yeah.
than anything else.
Hmm.
And so, but in a way, what we're talking about is that cyber diplomacy also is the fact that we've got this James Bond espionage going on behind the scenes,
Yep.
because actually we don't have to walk into another country. We can just sit at our desks, and either find information or attack people for a particular reason.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you see it. I mean, you see it at the sort of state level, diplomacy level, all of that. But you see it, in the corporate side, private sector, all of that as well. And we've seen instances where new companies have popped up based on some sort of insights that they've gotten gotten through certain means, to then build something that might be a bit faster, and definitely a lot cheaper, because they aren't then having to spend the same amount of money on R&D.
Yeah.
So it affects everything, every aspect. It affects the economy, and beyond. So I think there's a number of reasons why countries would want to engage in that sort of behavior, whether we agree with it or not, really.
So how do the diplomats handle the tension between the need to cooperate internationally and the reality that this cyber espionage is happening in parallel?
I think, I mean, they have to, essentially, they have to learn to cooperate, really. They have to have a sense of infrastructure safety. They have to look at things like AI governance, which we haven't really touched on AI yet, but I'm sure we will. It always comes up in conversation. But at the same time, they can, it's kind of like, how do I become best at intelligence gathering and influence? There are certain countries who will share insights with other countries. But again, I mean, we look at, and this isn't just I would say this goes beyond just cyber espionage, but espionage in general, if we look at historical examples, potentially like the Cambridge Five or something like that, that had a knock-on effect, right? In how certain countries can then trust other countries, allied countries, with information, and therefore, they might start to hold back. They might look to keep certain things sort of closer to the chest, and there's a real drawback, it's not great, I would say, for the allied countries, because they're not getting a full insight into what's happening. They're not getting the same type of intelligence that they could potentially get, had that not happened.
So one of the biggest issues in cyber conflict is knowing who's behind the attack. How does this uncertainty affect diplomatic relations?
I mean, I wish I could answer that with more gusto than I have in me right now. But I think the answer is really, we're kind of rewriting the rules a little bit at the moment. Especially with the emergence of AI, I would say I've been hearing quite a bit, both from I guess the thing that I feel I have a benefit to is because I work both in the private sector and I'm a researcher, I sort of hear it from both sides of the coin here. So there's a lot going on, I think, in terms of, the escalation of what's happening with AI. I've been hearing attacks are getting faster, they're becoming more adaptive, it's harder to trace. Obviously, there are massive companies working on attribution and how we look at that in a way that gives us the intelligence that we need, because attribution just for attribution's sake is not useful. But at the end of the day, things are being rewritten a little bit now because of these new advancements.
So let's talk about AI. So let's talk about what are those new advancements? Because I think in the past, I'm aware of people that got hacked by certain countries, where
Mhm.
they were doing oil research or something like that.
Yeah.
And the first they knew about it was they got a phone call from one of the government agencies here in the UK and said, "You do realise you've been hacked, do you?" And they said, "No, not at all." And what they thought was a joint venture with that organisation was that there wasn't a joint venture; that people were just
Yeah.
going to steal the results.
Mhm.
And that's the way the business is done. But with AI, it's kind of bigger than that, then, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's I mean, obviously there's a benefit to stealing insights from, any sort of AI company that's advanced and doing things that we couldn't possibly even dream of, really. There's definitely, I think, an advantage there. Um, but I personally think about things like defense, so how are we supercharging that sort of development? How is it going to then be shared amongst allied countries? But then how are we going to protect that? How are we going to make sure that there isn't sort of that single point of failure where, someone has just had a really bad password, or, someone gets an email? Because I know we love to sort of think about technology in these, very advanced terms, and it's films make it seem like they're sort of hacking into database after database after, and a lot of it does come down to the human element, and that data is there, and it's been proven time and time again. A lot of it is around social engineering. A lot of it is, just giving the wrong access to the wrong people, or people having, not set up properly, or misconfigure it, or whatever it might be. But a lot of the time, social engineering has a place within that sort of conversation. So as much as we want to talk about, the advancements of AI and all of that, we still haven't fixed the original issue, which is just, making sure that your your security posture is up to spec, really, and making sure that you're thinking about things in terms of not just what's coming down the pipe, but what are we doing right now? How are we mitigating the risks for? And also, I really hate the terminology around, humans being the weakest link, and, humans being the sort of single point of failure, or whatever they might say. I think that that comes with anything, there needs to be a level of education. And I think the more we can think about cyberspace, or however you want to call it, being online, in the same way that we would thinking about, we go outside and walk to the store and we lock our door, that education still has a big piece and a big presence, and part to play.
But if you think about some of the whistleblowers, or people that, the Edward Snowdens and the
Mhm.
I'm trying to think of some of the, where in effect the WikiLeaks situation caused a major impact
Yeah.
because of the fact that it was taking so much information. I mean, we never know, but you can
Mhm.
guarantee that spies died because of that.
Yeah, I think there have been a few accounts, in a number of books. I wish I remembered the name of the book. I was listening to an audio, but there is, I think it's called Prism actually. But it does talk about that sort of side of things and the research done. And it is by two journalists, which, give you a bit of a different perspective than maybe someone writing from, either, the public sector, or someone who has maybe a different, point of bias or interest. But I think there's yeah, we've seen a number of these cases, right? Jack Texera, I think his name is one, on Discord sharing information with friends, quite a young guy
Oh yeah,
now
yeah, yeah. I
now
remember that.
being,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because
yeah,
trying to
now,
impress his mates.
yeah, it's just a point of bragging, really. And I love. So there's this sort of terminology that, they use in the intelligence space, around motivations, and they use the terminology mice. And so it's, money, ideology, coercion, or ego, right? And you
Yeah.
typically fit within one of those. And for me, it just makes it so, because I'm a visual learner, it makes it so easy to then identify what the motivations are for these different sort of instances, because you can, and you don't adhere to just one. Obviously, if you take Snowden for example, I would probably argue uh, there's probably ideology, and a bit of ego there as well, and
So, so,
so.
so just let so just to go through that again, it's mice, which is M, motivation, I, ideology, C,
Mhm.
cohesion, and E, ego.
Uh, C is coercion,
Yeah,
and then E is ego. Yes, and
yeah.
actually, I think that I cannot remember the study. There's some interesting, really interesting stuff. Research papers done by Ursula Wilder, who is, I believe she is. I don't want to get it wrong, but she leads the psychology division of the CIA in the U.S. And some of her research is just fascinating on this. I definitely recommend. Like, you can get it on Google Scholar. It's free for everyone. But she does a little bit of a deep dive into some of the, I would say, more traditional espionage cases. So looking at Robert Hansen, Amos Ames, Ana Montez. So more political to a degree, Ana Montez, ideology. But then you have people like Robert Hansen, money and ego. You kind of see two. Usually, I think, at least from her research, from what I've gathered, you usually see more than one of those sort of, pieces of the puzzle. But incredibly interesting stuff. I love her work, and she's done a couple of podcasts as well, which I
Okay.
highly recommend.
So what is it that we can do? As for in terms of, if you're advising the leadership, say in any country, what's the single most important step they can take to protect themselves while still engaging internationally?
Um, Listen to the experts, right? I mean, like, it's all well and good, I think, especially from a perspective of government. I want to speak out of turn, but you have a different skill set potentially than the people working maybe in the private sector. I think there needs to be a huge bridge of the gap between the public and private sector and the information that is shared, because I think a lot of benefit can actually come from having those experts actually, help aid and build up the security posture of the public sector. So I think definitely bringing those experts in would be a key thing, in my eyes. And then, from a fun level, I would say just, look at research papers like from Ursula Wilder, like I mentioned, Dr. Craig Jarvis. I read everything he does,
Yeah.
fantastically well known in espionage and terrorism. Shawnee Delaney on LinkedIn, follow her for any insider threat, former DOD. Very, very insightful stuff. I think just educating yourself really on what's actually happening, and not making assumptions, basically just getting the information from the experts, I think helps.
Sarah, thank you so much for coming on and talking about cyber diplomacy. It's a fascinating subject. I've been waiting for this conversation because it's just, 'cause of course, what I've done is as soon as the, because I had to prepare for this, immediately I started opening the Pandora's box of what
Yeah.
it meant,
Yeah.
which again it's been fascinating. And I've got another interview coming up in September about. It's going to be about basic cybersecurity. So I'm actually reading a book on cybersecurity at the moment because the
Oh,
podcast
great.
is about that book.
Yeah.
And that person is a fellow at I can't remember if it's one of the London. It's either Imperial College or something like that. Anyway, that's coming.
Royal Holloway. Is it Royal
No, no, no.
Holloway?
It's
No.
either Imperial College or it's one of the inner London
Oh, okay. Yeah.
universities. She's written a book on it, so that's
Oh,
coming
well,
up
I'll be watching that for
in
sure.
September. I'll tag you on the post anyway.
Yeah.
But so thank you so much. So remind people where they can get hold of you.
Yes, absolutely. So you can find me on LinkedIn, Sara Carty, and unboring.digital. That's the website. That's my company website. But yeah, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I feel like I never get enough chances to talk about cyber diplomacy. So if I get the chance, I'll definitely take anyone up on it.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much, Sarah, for